The sheer terror it inspired was palpable, a cold dread that seeped into the bones of every Allied tank crewman. Across the battlefields of Europe, a shadow loomed, cast by the monstrous silhouette of the German Tiger tank. Its thick armor shrugged off Allied shells with disdain, while its mighty 80mm gun tore through steel with terrifying ease, often from ranges where the Shermans and Cromwells couldn't even hope to retaliate. Casualties mounted, morale wavered, and a desperate question echoed across the Allied lines. How do we stop the Tiger? This wasn't just a tactical problem, it was an existential crisis. Victory felt like a distant dream, snatched away by the overwhelming might of German armor. The standard M4 Sherman, the backbone of Allied tank forces, was woefully outgunned, its 75mm main cannon proving little more than a nuisance to the formidable Tigers. Every encounter was a gamble, often a sacrifice, with Allied crews knowing they faced a near-invincible foe. The aura of invincibility surrounding the German Tigers was absolute, crushing spirits and dictating the pace of battle. Something had to change, and quickly if the war was to be won. But from this crucible of desperation, an audacious answer began to emerge, born not from superior industrial might, but from ingenuity, improvisation, and the unwavering focus of a single individual. This is the untold story of how an improvised gun, housed within the familiar chassis of an M4 Sherman and guided by the unparalleled skill of a sharpshooter, systematically dismantled that aura of invincibility, turning the hunter into the hunted. It's the story of the M4 Sherman Firefly, a tank that against all odds would force the mighty German Tigers to finally taste defeat, delivering a humiliation that reverberated through the ranks of the Wehrmacht. We're going to dive deep into the heart of these epic confrontations. We'll explore the ingenious modifications that made the Firefly possible, transforming a seemingly inferior tank into a deadly weapon. We will uncover the desperate tactics employed by Allied commanders who had to rethink every engagement against an enemy they once believed unassailable. And we will bring to light the harrowing, often overlooked, personal accounts of the crews who stared down the barrel of a Tiger and refused to flinch. What made the sharpshooters who manned these Fireflies so exceptional? What were the specific moments, the legendary shots, that cemented the Firefly's place in history as the ultimate Tiger killer? How did this improvised, seemingly inferior tank, armed with a cobbled-together gun and guided by the unwavering focus of a single individual, systematically dismantle the aura of invincibility surrounding the German Tigers, turning the hunter into the hunted and delivering a humiliation that reverberated through the ranks of the Wehrmacht? Join us on Legends of War as we uncover the thrilling, untold story of how an audacious act of engineering, combined with the unparalleled skill of a sharpshooter, transformed the M4 Sherman Firefly into the deadliest weapon on the Western Front. Prepare to witness the moments that redefined tank warfare and proved that courage, ingenuity, and a steady hand can truly conquer all. The legend of the Firefly begins with a desperate need for firepower, a need that would be met by a cannon never intended for a Sherman. The standard 75mm gun mounted on the vast majority of M4 Shermans was simply outmatched. Its shells, effective against earlier German tanks like the Panzer IV, bounced harmlessly off the thick frontal armor of the Tiger and Panther. Allied tank crews were forced into desperate, often suicidal tactics, attempting to flank the German giants or engage them at point-blank range, hoping for a lucky shot at a weak point. This was not warfare. It was a desperate struggle for survival, a testament to the sheer disparity in firepower. The British, facing the same existential threat, possessed a weapon that could penetrate the Tiger's armor, the Ordnance QF 17-pounder anti-tank gun. This formidable cannon, originally designed for towed anti-tank roles, fired a shell with blistering velocity and immense kinetic energy, capable of piercing nearly 150 millimeters of armor at 1,000 yards. It was the answer, but how to put it into a tank that could maneuver on the battlefield? The 17-pounder was a beast. Its barrel was long, its breech massive, and its recoil system powerful. Cramming such a weapon into the relatively small turret of an M4 Sherman was deemed impossible by many. The Sherman's turret ring was too small, its internal space too cramped, and its existing gun mounting utterly unsuitable for the 17-pounder's immense forces. It was like trying to fit a battleship's cannon onto a destroyer. Yet the stakes were too high to accept impossible. British engineers, particularly at the School of Tank Technology, embarked on an audacious, almost defiant project. Every millimeter counted. The existing 75mm gun mount was stripped away. The turret structure itself had to be subtly but significantly redesigned, not just to accommodate the larger breech, but to balance the immense weight and length of the new gun. The gun's recoil mechanism was modified, shortened, and squeezed into the confined space. One of the most significant modifications involved the radio. Standard Shermans typically had the radio mounted in the rear of the turret. For the Firefly, this space was now critical for the gun's recoil and breech. The solution was to move the radio to an armored box welded onto the back of the turret, creating the distinctive bustle that became a hallmark of the Firefly. This also created a counterweight for the heavy gun. The sheer size of the 17-pounder's ammunition also posed a massive problem. The long, heavy shells took up far more space than the 75mm rounds. To make room for a workable ammunition load, a drastic measure was taken. The co-driver's position in the hull was eliminated. This space, along with other nooks and crannies, was repurposed for ammunition racks, bringing the Firefly's crew down from 5 to 4. This sacrifice highlighted the desperate necessity of the project. Every other consideration was secondary to firepower. The result was not just a Sherman with a bigger gun, it was a new breed of tank. Officially designated Sherman IC or VC, it quickly earned the nickname Firefly due to the bright muzzle flash of its powerful gun. It looked like a Sherman, but it was a wolf in sheep's clothing, capable of delivering a devastating punch that no other Allied tank could. Its long barrel, extending far beyond the hull, immediately marked it as something different, something lethal. The existence of the Firefly was a closely guarded secret. Allied commanders understood the psychological advantage of surprise. They hoped to unleash this new weapon onto the battlefield and shatter the myth of the Tiger's invincibility without the Germans knowing what hit them. Tank crews were instructed on its unique characteristics, its immense power, and the critical role it would play. This was not just a weapon, it was a strategic countermeasure, a desperate gamble to regain the initiative. The Firefly was about to enter the fray, a symbol of Allied ingenuity and defiance, ready to turn the hunter into the hunted. The stage was set for confrontations that would redefine tank warfare, where the steady hand of a sharpshooter would unlock the true potential of this improvised leviathan. The Firefly's debut was meticulously planned, a calculated gamble to turn the tide. Rather than massing them, Allied commanders opted for a strategic distribution, assigning one Firefly to every troop of standard Shermans. This wasn't just about maximizing their reach. It was a psychological tactic. The familiar silhouette of the Sherman would lull German tank crews into a false sense of security, only for the elongated barrel of the 17-pounder to deliver a devastating, unexpected blow. The Firefly became the silent predator, nestled among its brethren, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. This role demanded more than just a gunner, it demanded a sharpshooter. The crews selected for Fireflies were not merely operators. They were the elite, chosen for their exceptional marksmanship, their calm under pressure, and their uncanny ability to read a battlefield. Their training was intense, focusing not just on the mechanics of the massive 17-pounder, but on understanding the intricate weaknesses of German armor. They studied every angle, every plate, every potential shot placement on a Tiger or Panther, knowing that a single precise round was often their only chance. They were the eyes that would pierce the illusion of German invincibility, the hands that would guide the improvised gun to its target with deadly accuracy. The D-Day landings and the subsequent battles in Normandy provided the crucible for the Firefly's legend to begin. German armored divisions, spearheaded by their formidable Tigers, were a constant, terrifying threat. Allied forces pushed inland, but every advance was met with fierce resistance, often curtailed by the sudden, overwhelming appearance of an 88-Tatter gun. Then, the Fireflies began to respond. The first engagements were often chaotic, brutal affairs. A troop of Shermans would encounter a Tiger, the standard 75mm rounds bouncing off its sloped armor, the Allied crews bracing for the inevitable counterfire. But then, from within the seemingly outmatched formation, a Firefly would unleash its fury. The 17-pounder's shell, traveling at blistering velocity, would tear through the Tiger's side or rear armor, sometimes even its frontal plate at closer ranges, igniting ammunition or tearing through vital components. The muzzle flash, so bright it earned the tank its name, signaled not just a shot fired, but a paradigm shift. German tank crews, accustomed to their dominance, were utterly bewildered. A Sherman, a tank they had come to view as easily dispatched, was now destroying their most powerful machines. The initial shock quickly gave way to confusion, then to a chilling dread. The hunter was suddenly vulnerable, and the source of this vulnerability was a tank they thought they knew. Reports from the front lines began to filter back through the Wehrmacht command. There was a new, deadly variant of the Sherman, a long-barreled Sherman, capable of penetrating the Tiger's armor. The psychological impact was immediate and profound. The aura of invincibility surrounding the Tiger, which had instilled such terror in Allied ranks, began to crack. The Firefly's sharpshooters were not just destroying tanks, they were dismantling a psychological weapon. Each Tiger kill was a hammer blow against German morale, and a surge of hope for the Allied crews who had endured so much. No longer were they merely bait or cannon fodder. They now possessed a weapon that could truly fight back, a weapon that, in the right hands, could turn the tables. These sharpshooters became legends among their peers, their names whispered with reverence, their legendary shots becoming tales of defiance and triumph. They proved that ingenuity, combined with unparalleled skill, could overcome overwhelming technological superiority. The Firefly was not just a tank. It was a symbol of Allied resolve, a testament to what could be achieved when desperation met innovation, and when a steady hand met an impossible challenge. Its arrival marked the beginning of the end for the Tiger's reign of terror. The arrival of the Firefly had indeed marked a turning point, transforming the battlefield dynamics from one of sheer terror to one of calculated defiance. The German behemoths, once the undisputed kings of the battlefield, now faced an adversary capable of striking back with lethal force from unexpected quarters. This shift was not merely theoretical. It was forged in the crucible of countless engagements, each one a testament to the audacious engineering and, crucially, the unparalleled skill of the Firefly's gunners. Among these sharpshooters, certain names rose to legendary status, their actions echoing through the ranks of the Allied forces and striking fear into the hearts of the Wehrmacht. Perhaps no single individual epitomized the Firefly's deadly potential more than Sergeant Joe Ikins of the Northamptonshire Yeomanry, serving with the 1st Troop, a squadron. His actions on August 8, 1944, during Operation Totalize, became a defining moment for the Firefly and a stark humiliation for the German Tigers. As Allied forces pushed south from Caen, they encountered fierce German resistance, spearheaded by elements of the 12th SS Panzer Division Hitlerjugend, including their formidable Tiger tanks. Ekins, commanding a Firefly, found himself in a desperate engagement near Saint-Aignan-de-Cramenil. In a series of rapid, precise actions, Akins and his crew engaged and destroyed not one, not two, but 3 Tiger tanks within a matter of minutes. His first shot penetrated a Tiger's turret, disabling it instantly. A second Tiger, attempting to reposition, was caught by another pinpoint round. The third, a massive Tiger II, or King Tiger, was also neutralized by Akins's unerring accuracy. These were not lucky shots. They were the culmination of intense training, intimate knowledge of enemy armor, and nerves of steel under extreme pressure. Akins's legendary performance that day shattered any lingering doubts about the Firefly's capabilities and delivered a crushing psychological blow to the German forces. These legendary shots, delivered by sharpshooters like Akins, were the result of a meticulous approach to tank warfare. Firefly gunners understood that their 17-pounder, while devastating, still required precise shot placement against the heavily armored Tigers and Panthers. They focused on known weak points: the driver's vision port, the commander's cupola, the turret ring, and critically the thinner side and rear armor. This demanded incredible patience, often holding fire until the perfect angle presented itself, even under intense enemy fire. They were not simply firing, they were aiming to disable or destroy with every single round, conserving their limited ammunition and maximizing their impact. The tactical deployment of Fireflies evolved rapidly. Allied commanders, recognizing their unique value, began to integrate them as dedicated anti-tank assets within Sherman troops. No longer were they merely one tank among equals, they were the designated Tiger killers. Fireflies were often held in reserve, positioned on flanks or used in overwatch positions, allowing standard Shermans to draw enemy fire or maneuver, while the Firefly waited for its moment to unleash its devastating firepower. This created a new layer of complexity for German tank commanders, who could no longer assume that a Sherman formation was easily brushed aside. Every engagement became a dangerous gamble. The German reaction was one of initial disbelief, quickly followed by alarm. Reports of long-barrel Shermans capable of destroying Tigers at ranges once thought impossible filtered back through their command structure. Intelligence officers struggled to understand this new threat. Soon, directives were issued. Long-barrel Shermans were to be prioritized, targeted first in any engagement. German tank crews, once confident in their armor, now approached Sherman formations with a newfound caution, constantly scanning for the telltale elongated barrel. The psychological tables had turned. The hunter was now being hunted, and the humiliation of seeing their formidable Tigers fall to what they considered an inferior tank began to erode their morale, one legendary shot at a time. The Firefly, guided by the unwavering focus of its sharpshooters, had truly begun to dismantle the aura of German invincibility. The German High Command, once dismissive of the M4 Sherman, could no longer ignore the mounting evidence. Reports from the front painted a grim picture. Their formidable Tigers, once thought impervious, were being systematically destroyed by a new, deadly variant of the Allied workhorse. Directives filtered down through the panzer divisions: identify and eliminate the long-barrel Shermans at all costs. This was not merely a tactical adjustment, it was an acknowledgement of a profound shift in the balance of power, a public admission of vulnerability that gnawed at the morale of even the most hardened German tank crews. The psychological tables had turned with a vengeance, the battlefield transformed into a deadly game of cat and mouse. German Tiger commanders, no longer confident in simply rolling forward, began to adopt more cautious, often defensive tactics. They would hold back, employing their superior optics and range to try and spot the distinctive elongated barrel of a Firefly before committing to an engagement. Their priority shifted from outright destruction to identifying and neutralizing the primary threat. This hesitancy, born from a newfound respect for the Firefly's punch, often bought precious time for Allied infantry and other armored elements to maneuver, a luxury previously unheard of against the relentless German armored thrusts. But the Firefly, despite its devastating gun, remained an M4 Sherman. Its armor, while adequate against some threats, was still no match for a direct hit from an ATT-teamed KWK-36 or KWK-43 cannon. This inherent vulnerability placed immense pressure on the Firefly crews, particularly the sharpshooters. They understood that their survival often hinged on the very first shot. There was little room for error. A missed shot, or one that failed to penetrate, would inevitably draw a torrent of retaliatory fire, often with catastrophic consequences for their thinly armored vehicle. This constant existential threat refined their skills to an almost supernatural degree, transforming them into masters of concealment, ambush, and precision. Firefly crews learned to exploit every fold in the terrain, every hedgerow, every ruined building. They became adept at hull-down positions, exposing only the gun and the heavily armored mantlet, minimizing their target profile. Their role often involved patiently stalking their prey, sometimes for hours, waiting for the perfect moment. They were the designated tiger bait, but also the designated tiger killer. Standard Shermans would often draw the enemy's attention, engaging them with their less potent guns, while the Firefly remained hidden, observing, calculating, waiting for a tiger or panther to expose a flank or present a critical weak point. Then, with a blinding muzzle flash that belied its otherwise humble appearance, the 17-pounder would roar, delivering a killing blow. The precision required was staggering. Engaging a moving tiger at 1,500 yards, a range where the 80 Tesnitas was still lethal, demanded not just a steady hand, but an innate understanding of ballistics, windage, and target lead. The Firefly sharpshooters were not simply aiming for the tank, they were aiming for specific components: the drive sprocket to immobilize it, the engine deck to ignite fuel, or the turret ring to jam its traverse. These were not random acts of destruction. They were calculated surgical strikes, designed to cripple the most fearsome tanks on the battlefield with a single, well-placed round. Beyond Sergeant Joe Ekin's legendary triple kill, countless other Firefly crews etched their names into the annals of Allied heroism. In the brutal hedgerow country of Normandy, Fireflies became instrumental in breaking German counterattacks. During Operation Goodwood, despite heavy Allied losses, Fireflies accounted for a significant number of German heavy tank kills, blunting the spearhead of panzer divisions. Later, in the push through France and into Germany, the Firefly continued to prove its worth, providing the critical anti-tank punch needed to overcome the increasingly desperate yet still formidable German armored resistance. The presence of the Firefly transformed the entire tactical landscape. Allied commanders could now plan offensives with a genuine counter to the Tiger, rather than simply hoping to avoid them. The psychological burden shifted from the Allied crews, who no longer felt helpless, to the German tank commanders, who now knew that any Sherman formation could potentially harbor a deadly Firefly. This constant threat forced German forces to deploy their Tigers and Panthers more cautiously, often dispersing them or holding them in reserve, rather than committing them to overwhelming armored assaults. This dispersal, in turn, often weakened their defensive lines, creating opportunities for Allied breakthroughs. The Firefly and the sharpshooter who wielded its improvised gun had not just killed tanks, they had fundamentally altered the strategic calculus of the Western Front, systematically dismantling the myth of German armored invincibility, one legendary shot at a time. The humiliation was not just in the destruction of their finest machines, but in the forced adaptation, the fear, and the ultimate realization that their technological superiority had been nullified by ingenuity and courage. The humiliation was not just in the destruction of their finest machines, but in the forced adaptation, the fear and the ultimate realization that their technological superiority had been nullified by ingenuity and courage. German intelligence, initially baffled, eventually identified the M4 Sherman Firefly as the primary culprit. They knew its distinctive long barrel and the telltale muzzle flash, and soon specific orders were issued. Long-barrel Shermans were to be targeted above all others, a stark admission that the mighty Tigers, once the apex predators, now had a predator of their own. This shift in priority fundamentally altered German tactical doctrine, forcing their tank commanders to rethink every engagement, every advance, and every defensive posture. The psychological impact on German tank crews was profound. The sense of invulnerability, once their greatest asset, had been shattered. No longer could they confidently engage Allied armor, knowing their shells would bounce off harmlessly. Now, every Sherman formation held the potential for a deadly surprise. This constant threat bred caution, hesitation, and a creeping demoralization. German crews, once eager to confront the seemingly inferior M4, now approached such encounters with a palpable dread, constantly scanning for the telltale barrel that signified their potential demise. The psychological initiative had irrevocably shifted, and the Firefly, an improvised weapon, was responsible for that monumental change. For the Firefly crews, the pressure was immense and unrelenting. They were the designated Tiger killers, but they also knew their vehicle, for all its firepower, was still a Sherman at heart. Its armor offered little protection against a direct hit from an 80mm gun, meaning survival often hinged on the first shot. This existential threat forged an elite cadre of sharpshooters whose mental fortitude was as critical as their marksmanship. They had to be patient, disciplined, and utterly fearless, often holding their fire for agonizing minutes, even under intense enemy shelling, waiting for the perfect angle, the fleeting moment when a Tiger exposed a vulnerable flank or presented a critical weak point. Beyond the precision aiming, the physical demands of operating the 17-pounder were considerable. The massive rounds were heavy and cumbersome in the cramped turret, requiring a strong and coordinated loader. The recoil, though managed by the modified system, was still formidable, shaking the entire tank. Maintenance was a constant challenge, as the improvised nature of the conversion meant parts were not always readily available, and field repairs often required ingenious solutions. Yet the crews persevered, driven by the knowledge that their tank was the only reliable counter to the German behemoths, and that their skill could turn the tide of battle. As the war progressed, the Firefly's legend only grew. From the brutal fighting in the hedgerows of Normandy, through the liberation of France, and into the desperate winter battles of the Ardennes, the Firefly proved its worth time and again. It was instrumental in blunting German counteroffensives, providing the crucial anti-tank punch that allowed Allied infantry and other armored units to advance. Commanders learned to integrate Fireflies into their formations with increasing sophistication, using them as mobile ambush platforms, overwatch assets, or spearheads in coordinated assaults, always capitalizing on their ability to deliver a knockout blow to the most heavily armored German targets. German attempts to counter the Firefly were largely ineffective. They tried to prioritize its destruction, but its familiar Sherman silhouette made it difficult to distinguish at range, especially in the chaos of battle. They developed more cunning ambush tactics, but Firefly crews, acutely aware of their vulnerability, became masters of concealment and evasive maneuvers. The Germans' technological superiority, once absolute, was now consistently undermined by the combination of a powerful, improvised gun and the unwavering skill of its sharpshooter. The Firefly had irrevocably altered the dynamic of tank warfare on the Western Front, systematically dismantling the myth of German armored invincibility, one legendary, humiliating shot at a time. The German attempts to neutralize the Firefly, while desperate, often proved futile. The sheer numbers of Shermans, even with a smaller proportion of Fireflies, meant that identifying and eliminating the specific threat in the chaos of battle was a daunting, often impossible task. The Germans tried everything, prioritizing targets, developing new anti-tank ambushes, and even attempting to mimic the Firefly's long barrel on some of their captured Shermans for deception, but none could truly stem the tide. The psychological damage was done, a deep wound inflicted upon the once unshakable confidence of the Wehrmacht's armored divisions. This humiliation wasn't just about the loss of tanks, it was about the loss of an ideal. The Tiger and Panther were symbols of German technological prowess, designed to be superior, to dominate. To see them systematically picked apart by what they considered an inferior mass-produced American tank, albeit one with a British gun, was an unbearable blow to their morale and their perceived invincibility. German reports from the front lines increasingly spoke of the Sherman with the long gun, with a mixture of dread and grudging respect, a testament to the Firefly's impact. The narrative within the Wehrmacht shifted from one of overwhelming superiority to one of cautious defense and often desperate improvisation. For the Allied forces, the Firefly became more than just a weapon. It was a potent symbol of defiance and ingenuity. Its presence in a Sherman troop instantly boosted morale, transforming a potentially terrifying encounter with a Tiger into a tangible opportunity for victory. Crews of standard Shermans, knowing a Firefly was nearby, could engage with renewed confidence, drawing enemy fire or maneuvering to expose a Tiger's flank, trusting that their powerful partner would deliver the killing blow. This symbiotic relationship between the standard Sherman and the Firefly became a hallmark of Allied armored tactics, maximizing the strengths of both and compensating for their individual weaknesses. The sharpshooters within the Fireflies bore an immense psychological burden, yet they embraced it with a unique blend of courage and calculated precision. They knew the eyes of their entire troop, and often the fate of an engagement rested on their shoulders. Their training was rigorous, focusing not just on ballistic tables and range estimation, but on battlefield awareness, target prioritization, and the mental fortitude to remain calm under the most extreme pressure. They practiced relentlessly against captured German armor, memorizing every weak point, every potential deflection angle. This wasn't just about hitting a target. It was about understanding the anatomy of destruction, knowing precisely where to strike to achieve the most catastrophic effect with a single round. The conditions inside the Firefly were far from ideal for such precision. The cramped turret, already tight for 4 men in a standard Sherman, became even more so with the massive 17-pounder breech and its associated modifications. The loader, in particular, faced an arduous task, wrestling with heavy, awkward shells in a confined space, often while the tank was moving erratically under fire. The gunner's vision, while aided by improved optics, was still limited, requiring constant communication with the commander and driver to spot targets and position the tank correctly. Every shot was a coordinated effort, a dance of precision and brute force executed under the most harrowing circumstances. Yet from these challenging conditions emerged a new breed of tank crewmen. They were the silent hunters, the patient stalkers, the ones who would wait for minutes, sometimes agonizingly long minutes, while a Tiger or Panther maneuvered until the perfect shot presented itself. Their discipline was legendary. They understood that a hasty shot was a wasted shot, and a wasted shot often meant their own demise. Their success was not just a matter of luck or superior technology. It was a testament to their unwavering focus, their intimate knowledge of their weapon and their enemy, and their absolute refusal to be intimidated by the formidable reputation of the German heavy tanks. The Firefly's impact extended beyond direct tank-on-tank engagements. Its mere presence on the battlefield forced German commanders to rethink their entire operational doctrine. No longer could they rely on overwhelming armored assaults to break through Allied lines. They had to consider the possibility of a hidden Firefly capable of knocking out their lead tanks at long range, thereby disrupting the entire attack. This forced caution often slowed German advances, giving Allied forces precious time to consolidate positions, bring up reinforcements, or launch their own counterattacks. The Firefly, therefore, wasn't just a tank killer. It was a strategic disruptor, an equalizer that fundamentally reshaped the flow of battle on the Western Front. The stories of Firefly crews, though often overshadowed by the larger narrative of the war, became legendary within the Allied ranks. Tales of impossible shots, daring ambushes, and single-handed destruction of multiple German behemoths spread rapidly, fueling morale and solidifying the Firefly's reputation. It became known as the tank that could kill tigers for breakfast, a stark contrast to the initial dread inspired by the German heavy armor. This transformation from terror to triumph, spearheaded by an improvised weapon and guided by exceptional sharpshooters, was a profound psychological victory, proving that ingenuity and courage could indeed overcome even the most daunting technological superiority. The Firefly had not just dented the myth of German invincibility, it had shattered it completely, leaving in its wake a new legend forged in fire and steel. The shattering of German invincibility wrought by the Firefly sent ripples far beyond the immediate battlefield. It forced a re-evaluation at the highest echelons of the Wehrmacht. Their once unquestioned technological supremacy in armor had been fundamentally challenged, not by an equally advanced design, but by an audacious improvisation. This realization that their finest machines could be systematically dismantled by a modified Sherman was a bitter pill for the architects of Blitzkrieg. Intelligence reports, initially filled with disbelief, soon confirmed the devastating effectiveness of the 17-pounder. The long-barrel Shermans became an obsession, a ghost in the machine that haunted their armored divisions. They were no longer just a nuisance. They were a direct, existential threat to the very doctrine of German armored warfare. This forced the Germans into tactical contortions. No longer could they rely on overwhelming numerical superiority or the sheer brute force of their heavy tanks to simply roll over opposition. Every engagement became a calculated risk, every advance meticulously scrutinized for the telltale silhouette of a Firefly. They began to deploy their Tigers and Panthers not as spearheads, but often as defensive anchors, hoping to lure the Fireflies into ambushes where their own 88mm guns could finally gain an advantage. This shift from aggressive offense to cautious defense was a profound psychological victory for the Allies, directly attributable to the Firefly's unparalleled anti-tank capability. It bought time, saved lives, and allowed Allied forces to dictate the pace of battles in ways previously unimaginable. For the Firefly sharpshooters, this evolving German caution only sharpened their own tactical acumen. They anticipated the ambushes, learned to read the terrain for hidden threats, and perfected the art of the counter-ambush. Their role was not merely to destroy, it was to deceive, to draw out the enemy, and then to deliver a decisive blow when least expected. They became masters of camouflage and concealment, often spending hours in static, hull-down positions, merging with the landscape, waiting for the perfect opportunity to strike. The sheer patience required, the mental discipline to remain immobile under enemy fire, knowing that their single shot could turn the tide, was immense. This wasn't just tank warfare. It was a deadly game of chess, played with steel and high explosives, where the sharpshooter was the grandmaster. The improvised nature of the Firefly's gun installation, while a testament to British engineering ingenuity, presented its own unique challenges. The 17-pounder, a powerful anti-tank cannon designed for towed artillery, was squeezed into the Sherman's turret with minimal space to spare. This meant the loader's job was incredibly difficult, requiring immense strength and agility to handle the long, heavy rounds in the cramped confines. The gunner's position was also less than ideal, and the commander often had to operate without the benefit of a dedicated machine gun, sacrificing close-quarter defense for anti-tank punch. Yet these limitations only underscored the remarkable skill of the crews. They learned to operate their weapon with an almost telepathic coordination, turning a clunky improvisation into a finely tuned instrument of destruction. The Firefly's legend wasn't built on technological perfection, but on audacious adaptation and the sheer nerve of its crews. It was a testament to the idea that ingenuity, when coupled with unwavering resolve, could overcome seemingly insurmountable odds. The German High Command could throw their most advanced, most heavily armored machines onto the battlefield, but the Firefly, guided by the steady hand of a sharpshooter and armed with its cobbled-together gun, proved time and again that brute force could be humbled. This was the ultimate humiliation, seeing their symbols of power systematically picked apart by a tank they had once dismissed as inferior, a tank that had been transformed into a predator through sheer, unadulterated grit. The psychological warfare waged by the Firefly was as potent as its physical firepower. The constant threat, the knowledge that any engagement with an M4 Sherman could suddenly turn deadly, chipped away at the morale of German tank crews. They began to question their own invincibility, a doubt that spread through the ranks like a contagion. This fear, this forced caution, slowed their advances, disrupted their formations, and ultimately gave the Allied forces a critical edge. The Firefly, therefore, did more than just destroy tanks. It destroyed confidence, shattered morale, and systematically dismantled the very aura of superiority that had underpinned German armored might. The M4 Sherman Firefly, an audacious improvisation born of necessity, stands as a towering testament to ingenuity and courage in the face of overwhelming odds. It was never designed to be the ultimate tank, but through a confluence of brilliant British engineering and the unparalleled skill of its sharpshooters, it became precisely that, the nemesis of the German Tiger. The humiliation it inflicted was multifaceted, a deep wound to the Wehrmacht's pride and a fundamental challenge to their doctrine of armored superiority. No longer could the Tigers and Panthers advance with impunity, their crews secure in their technological advantage. The Firefly had changed the game, instilling a new fear, forcing caution, and dismantling the very aura of invincibility that had defined German heavy armor. This wasn't just about ballistic superiority, it was a profound psychological victory. The constant threat of the 17-pounder, the knowledge that even the mighty Tiger could be brought down by a well-aimed shot from a long-barrel Sherman, eroded morale and sowed doubt throughout German armored divisions. For the Allied forces, the Firefly became a symbol of hope, a tangible counter to the terror that the Tigers once inspired. It allowed them to fight not just with steel, but with renewed confidence, knowing that they possessed a weapon capable of turning the hunter into the hunted. The sharpshooters, the unsung heroes within those cramped turrets, embodied this shift. Their unwavering focus, their legendary patience, and their intimate understanding of their weapon and their enemy transformed every engagement into a calculated duel. They were the ones who truly delivered the humiliation, not just by destroying tanks, but by systematically breaking the spirit of an elite fighting force. They proved that a steady hand and an unyielding will could overcome the most formidable machines of war. The story of the M4 Sherman Firefly is more than just a tale of tank warfare. It is a powerful narrative about human resilience, adaptation, and the relentless pursuit of victory. It reminds us that innovation often arises from desperation, and that true power lies not just in technology, but in the courage and ingenuity of those who wield it. The Firefly didn't just win battles, It redefined tank combat, leaving an indelible mark on military history and forever cementing its place as the tank that dared to humiliate the mighty German Tigers. If you found this deep dive into the legend of the Firefly as compelling as we did, make sure to hit that like button. What other legendary confrontations or improvised weapons from history fascinate you? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to Legends of War for more untold stories of valor, strategy, and the machines that shaped our world. Join our community and keep the legends alive.